40 for Rateable Crest Titans.
The AWDC Britpart Comp Safari Championship in 2024 was another close and exciting season, with new faces and old challengers joining in the fun over the wide variation of venues on the calendar. And it all started way back in March with the first trip to Walters Arena. Let's head back into the first runs of the season then, and it would be the early lead for Kevin Stubbs, a good lead in that position as well. Having not been to the venue for a number of years, it would be something of an ideal start. This would be the first time out in the new Can-Am Maverick R for Paul Rowlands and Neil Lloyd on a Comp Safari. Only one other non-safari event before this to test the car. They get a puncture on the first run of the day, frustration early into the course. But thankfully for them, they still managed to end the second run with second place overall, leading 5A. A new car as well to start the season for Jason Rowlands and Liam Dudley. Well, a new old car back in the Loft House Freelander for the first time in 18 months. It would take them a little time to get back into the swing of things, but they were going well. Third place overall for now. No punctures for the pair, however, they do knock one of the wheels, buckling it and slowing their progress. They lie second in Class 8 as well for now. Fourth place at this stage will be Matthew Hall. His car not ready for the first round, so he was being loaned one of the Par Homes team cars. The first time driving it was loading it onto the trailer, so the position so far was pretty impressive, lying second in the Class 5A. Simon Cooper would be another driver not to have been to this venue in a while. He leads the way though, nevertheless, in Class 9 by the end of Run 2, having just a 2-second advantage in 5th place as well. And behind Cooper on the overall results will be Rob Morris and Kevin Powell. They were enjoying the mix of technical and fast sections on the course, ending the morning with 6th overall, 3rd in Class 8. Rob Scone hadn't been out for around 4 years. This time, Tom Aubrey alongside, a new partnership, and things were pretty much going to plan. They do get a 1-minute time penalty for hitting some of the stage furniture though when they get a little too over-enthusiastic, but we can forgive them at the opening round, can't we? A fastest time as well, so they were going pretty well at the moment in 7th place. Peter Jackson would be the only crew this weekend taking advantage of the split in Class 5. The only crew in Class 5B, in fact, this time out. But he was still going well, lying in 8th place on the overall leaderboard. Hemi Smith was back again this season after a good finish last year, lying within the top 10 overall after the morning's and indeed the season's first runs. 9th overall, 3rd in Class 5A for now. And rounding out the top 10 was Brian Birch. A strong start to the season with the lead in Class 6 as well at this stage in the event. Douglas Devenall Batt certainly wasn't where he should have been on the leaderboard, usually fighting for our overall podium places here in the AWDC, but a maximum on the first run would put him way down the order and into a chasing and probably frustrated position. 28th place overall, 8th in the class, and it would be some comeback to get some worthwhile points from this first round. Unfortunately, an accident on the course would cause a big delay in the action, resulting in the event being shortened to only 4 runs. But that was still enough for Shabs Piercy and Paul Rain to get their first taste of Comp Safari, and they'd be back. A sheared ball joint and brake issues, though, would mean it wasn't a good weekend as far as the results were concerned. And it was a disappointing debut in the new car for Philippa and James Tennant. A good run on Run 3 would show some promise, but then they'd suffer a failed wishbone on Run 4. It would be the end of the road for the pair here at the opening round. '30th overall wasn't the finish that Douglas Devenall Batt would have wanted, But seat time at this early stage in the season was also important. Not a comeback from the morning's maximum, but a worthwhile weekend with the times after that. Nick Collins and Alison Brooke would have a good day. No issues at all, which was rare here at the opening round, wasn't it? No punctures even. Not having to put a spanner on the car all day, in fact. They take the Class 7 victory, as well as 21st on our leaderboard. Class 2 winners here at round 1 would be Jonathan Harford and Daniel Drummond. They were putting in some strong times to take 20th as well. Thomas Parker would get a puncture on the final run, but manages to get the car to the finish. 19th place, second in Class 1. But the class winners this weekend in Class 1 would be Daniel and Alan Wilcox. A good run from them to take victory, and with just less than a minute by the end of the event, which could have been closer had it not been for that puncture from their closest rivals. For Kieran Jones, though, it will be the class victory in Class 4. A good, solid end to the day from 14th on the overall leaderboard as well. Brian Birch, though, would have a good weekend at the opening round of the season, just missing out on a top 10 finish, but taking the Class 6 victory, and that was a welcomed start from 11th. We're on to the top 10, and in 10th place it was Robert Jones, taking 3rd in Class 9 as well with that result. The times were good for Tom Woodward and Oakley Hayward as they get used to the move from 2 wheels to 4. They take 9th place overall, 2nd in Class 5A. A great debut for the pair. Rob Scone and Tom Aubrey would have issues catching people on the course through the afternoon runs, obviously meaning that they were going well, but the hold-ups would cost them dearly. They end the event 8th place overall, 2nd in Class 9, and perhaps wondering what might have been. For Peter Jackson in the 5B class, though, it would just be himself as far as class honours were concerned. So that class victory was in the bag, but more importantly, it was a 7th place overall finish. A great end to the first round. Rob Morris and Kevin Powell had enjoyed their event here at Walters Arena, as they should, taking the Class 8 victory and an emphatic 6th place overall. They enjoyed the mix of conditions that the opening round had thrown at them. And for Simon Cooper, it will be 5th place overall, taking the Class 9 victory as well in the process. A good, solid weekend without any issues out there on the course. Matthew Hall was happy with a clean run throughout the day. Wasn't something we could say for many of our crews. All close on the times as well and no issues, meaning that the runs were enough to get him the Class 5A victory, as well as just missing out on a podium in 4th. And it was a good day in the car as far as the overall times were concerned as well for Paul Rowlands and Neil Lloyd. Times looking good, the new car performing well from the start, and they take the final step on the podium in 3rd. It would actually be a position that they shared, on times at least, with son Jason Rowlands, Liam Dudley alongside. They had a good afternoon, equaling the times by the finish, but they take their 2nd place based on them putting in a faster time for the tiebreak. You can't get a closer finish than this on the podium. And at the opening round. Bodes well, doesn't it, for a good battle this season. But ahead of that battle for 2nd and 3rd, it would be a great run for Kevin Stubbs to take victory this weekend. The first time out in the car, and it wasn't actually his car either. A trouble-free run would see him taking the win by just over a minute. So we've reached the end of the opening round of the AWDC Britpart Comp Safari Championship, and the leaderboard at the top looks like this. For the 2nd round of the AWDC Britpart Safari Championship, we are heading south, about as far south as you can go, in fact, to Bovington for the Clouds Hill round of the championship. And despite what seems like months of rain in the UK, the crews were met with surprisingly dry and dusty conditions. Over the first of the runs, it will be Paul Rowlands taking the early lead, getting used to the new car now and pushing it harder. So hard, in fact, that but he would bend some of the suspension on run 2, needing a bit of work doing in service before he goes back out on that course. Second place at this stage was Jason Rowlands. 16 seconds the difference after run 2. There was no way he'd be settling for that though over the remaining runs of the day. A big push was on, but it wasn't a bad start given he hadn't actually driven the car off-road yet. Aaron Birch and Sam Harnell had a car on loan from Guy Smith at GSR this weekend while Aaron's car was being built. It was a great start. They end the morning's first 2 runs, 3rd place on the overall leaderboard. And looking at the results, it was safe to say that the buggies were in their element on this course. The suspension on them soaking up the rough, dry, dusty conditions. And for Douglas Devonall-Batt, it will be 4th place in the class and on the overall results as well. Just 11 seconds off the podium positions. Rob Morris, meanwhile, will be the first of the non-buggy crews on the timesheets for now, leading the way in Class 8 from 5th overall. The times coming down as the morning went on as well. We're back to the 5A class for 6th overall, but it was 5th in the class for now for Paddy Barker. The times starting to spread out a little as far as the overall times were concerned at this stage as we get to this point on the leaderboard, but still a chance to gain some positions with 6 more runs to go, and the jeopardy, which we always know is waiting around the corner at AWDC rounds. Philippa and James Tennant would make a good start. Philippa starting the driving this time out, and the pair lying in 7th overall thanks to her efforts. Loving this weekend's course at Bovington, this pair. Those of you with a good memory will remember that Steve Smith retired on this round last season, so there'd be a score to settle, or at least a demon to exercise. For now, it will be 8th place overall, leading the way in Class 9. A better start, that was for sure. Jordan Shirley will be the fastest of the B-Maxwell cars over the first run, but frustratingly, it wouldn't last, breaking a half shaft on run 2, and without a spare, run 3 was done in 2-wheel drive, resulting in a broken prop shaft. A disappointing early end after going so well out of the blocks. At least he did manage to get out on 3 runs because he had 3 new co-drivers who had never been in a comp safari car before, who all wanted a run. Stuart Cornew, Jack Westhead and Kev Stokes all getting their first experience of the sport from behind the windscreen for at least 1 run. And rounding out the top 10 for now will be Hemi Smith, only 7 seconds back on the overall timesheets and of course set to inherit at least 1 position going into the next runs of the event. Over the middle part of the day, we'd see some change at the top. Jason Rowlands managing to overhaul Dad to take the lead of the event, but it was still close, only 8 seconds the advantage still. So that, of course, puts Paul Rowlands at the moment down in 2nd place. But was he going to settle for that? Was he heck? A push would now be on for the final few runs. There was only 1 speed now, and that's called flat out. Aaron Birch and Sam Harnell were struggling a little on some of the faster sections of the course. The car can only do 85 miles per hour top speed. So it was a case of trying their best to get the lines right and carry that speed as much as possible. They continue to lie in 3rd place for now. No change either for Douglas Devonall-Batt, 4th overall and in the class as well. But the gap to the podium positions was getting a little bigger. Rob Morris, though, would continue to hold the lead in Class 8, the fastest of our non-buggy cars still, and going well to hold on to that position. Philippa and James Tennant were another crew going well, moving up a position on the overall timesheets as well. Philippa still doing all of the driving as the times were looking good. A clutch issue on run 5 might have changed that around so close to the end of the run. It wasn't an issue though. On to the final runs of the day and the final overall results then. Daniel and Alan Wilcox will be the sole Class 1 survivors. Battling hard, they would have rather won it on the stages, of course, and not by default. But of course, they still had to get to the finish. And they damaged a shock in the process, replacing it and managing to keep that good result in 21st. Chris and David Bowler had a difficult weekend. They were sharing the driving, and the times have been pretty close between the pair of them. Just a couple of seconds off each other. But it will be Chris taking the fastest time in that little family battle here at round 2 and leading the way in Class 3. On to the top 10 now, and it will be Kieran Jones and Eloise Donovan taking that 10th spot. They fixed the morning's ECU issue, but there was more frustration to come. A suspension problem will be holding them back a little, having to make sure they got to the end without damaging the car any further. And it was a great comeback drive for Matthew Hall. Having dropped right down the order through the morning, he managed to climb all the way back into 9th. Not the finish he came here looking for. After that start though, it was damage limitation, and that result was not to be sniffed at. The car had gone well all day for Bruce Mallet and Adrian Beer, and they were happy with how things had progressed inside it. That means they could push for a higher position on the 3rd round in a few weeks' time, and they'd be looking to do just that. For now, though, 8th overall, 2nd in Class 9, was seeing them build their championship campaign nicely. Hemi Smith was another to stay out of trouble today, getting to the end of the event with a 7th place finish. The car going well, she also takes 3rd place in Class 5A as well. And Steve Smith puts that non-finish at this round last year behind him well and truly, getting to the finish of the event, but not only with the Class 9 victory, a fantastic 6th place overall as well. Things had also gone well for Philippa and James Tennant. They enjoy a good, clean run to take 5th overall. More importantly, they get to the finish. A chance to show what they and the car can do when things are going to plan. They take 2nd in Class 5A as far as the points battle is concerned as well. Douglas Devenall Batt had kept things neat and tidy to get to the end of the event, exactly where he'd been for most of the day, taking 4th place overall. The class victory in 5A as well was his. Things had also gone to plan for Aaron Birch and Sam Harnell. They get to the finish of the event with that podium position that they'd held all day. A strong finish. They would catch a few cars out there on the course though, but luckily at this venue, plenty of places to get past and plenty of promise as well with that pace for future rounds and a big championship battle hopefully on the cards. It will be all change once again, though, at the top of our leaderboard. Jason Rowlands unable to hold on to that lead, having to settle for 2nd in the family battle and on our overall leaderboard. A great result, though. Some amazing pace out there on the course. And that, of course, means that it's Paul Rowlands taking victory and the lion's share of the mantelpiece at home this weekend. A great end to a battle that had been switching around course by course, run by run. Family honours to Paul this weekend. So at the end of a tough and dusty 2nd round, here's how the results ended up. Round 3 of the AWDC Britpart Comp Safari Championship headed to Wales. And we'd carried over the sunshine from the 2nd round, which meant another dry and dusty event this weekend lay in store. Over the first couple of runs, it would be Jason Rowlands who took the early lead, fastest on both of the runs so far this morning, and opening up a good 28-second advantage in front. Second at this stage will be Douglas Devonall Batt. Second in the class as well, behind Rowland. The time on run 2, much closer to our leader. And if that pace kept up, it would be a good battle throughout the day. And indeed, it was close with third place as well. Matthew Hall ending the first couple of runs in that position, and only 3 seconds back from second at this stage as well. Unfortunately for Paul Rowlands, it would be a disaster of a morning. Problems on the second run would see him pull over, ending up with a maximum, putting him down in 33rd place. Disappointing after setting a second fastest time on the opening run of the event. Just outside the podium positions, it will be 4th place for Guy Smith, taking to the driving seat again and going well at this early stage, but there will be a 30-second gap to make up if he wanted to make it onto the podium. This weekend would only be the second Comp Safari event for Shabs Piercy. Ed Cobley alongside this time out, and despite a problem with the car overheating and going into limp mode, things were going pretty well. They were up to 5th place, even with some issues. Bruce Mallet and Adrian Beer were pushing the car a little harder this time out. After the last few rounds had gone to plan, they were going well, leading the way in Class 9 at this stage in the event. James and Philippa Tennant start the morning off well without any issues to report. James taking the driver's seat on the first half of the day and setting some good times to put the pair in 7th place overall for now. And it would be the lead in Class 3 for Ed Smith. And it was a strong lead at that in the class as well. The course seemed to be suiting the car, which helped. He ends the morning's opening 2 runs with 8th place overall. Just behind in the overall results will be Brian Birch. And that was a class-leading start as well, leading the way in Class 6 from 9th on the overall leaderboard. And rounding out the top 10 were Kieran Jones and Eloise Donovan, making a cracking start to the day. The car going well, and they lead the way in Class 4 after run 2. On to the next couple of runs, and there wouldn't be any change at the top. Jason Rowlands keeping the lead and, in fact, extending that advantage to now almost 2 minutes. So that would mean that a victory on run times was unlikely for Douglas Devonall Batt, but the plan would be to drive fast and be there if anything happened to Rowlands up ahead, and we've seen it before. No change from Matthew Hall in 3rd place. The times between him and second still close. Only 21 seconds the difference between the pair at this stage, so things could still change. And things were going to plan overall for Shabs Piercy and Ed Cobley. They move up a position to 4th now. They did catch a slower car briefly, but managed to get past with minimal time lost. And that change in position would be at the expense of Guy Smith. He remains close to the top of the results overall, but now from a 5th place position on the leaderboard. On to the final runs then here at round 3, and we'd unfortunately lose Jason and Deb Morgan. The drive belt on the car breaking for a second time. They'd have to call it a day. And that great run would come to an end for Shabs Piercy and Ed Cobley as well. They break the inlet manifold on the car, forced into limp mode to get that car back to the end of the run. They get a couple of maximum times, dropping them right down the order from what could well have been a podium finish on only their 2nd Comp Safari. And it would be a strong result this weekend for Daniel and Alan Wilcox. They take victory in Class 1 with 20th place on the overall leaderboard as well in the Freelander. In Class 8, it would be victory for Owen Timms, finishing just outside our top 10 overall in 11th. And this weekend would be the best result to date for Nick Collins and Alison Brooke. They round out the top 10 finishers here at round 3. Just one puncture in the final run, but that also could have been the difference between their 2nd in-class finish and perhaps the class win this weekend. So with the 10th place pair taking 2nd in the class, it will be the class victory for Brian Dyke. A good end to this weekend's event, 9th place overall as well. A small issue when the boost hose came off on run 5 would mean Kieran Jones and Eloise Donovan would be down on power a little. And a double puncture wasn't exactly making things easy either. They end the event 8th place overall with the Class 4 win. In Class 6, it was the win for Brian Birch, a great result as well, with 7th place overall. Philippa Tennant had taken over the driving from James in the final 3 runs of the event, and the times were still looking good. The battle for the overall results was a close one, and the pair would also take 2nd place in Class 5 with that 6th spot. Their close fight would be with Bruce Mallet and Adrian Beer, finishing just ahead of them on the overall standings in 5th. Only a few seconds of an advantage as well by the finish. They take 1st place in Class 9 with that finish. The top of the results wouldn't really change. Guy Smith ending the event where he'd been all day, 4th place. A great end to the event though, with some very strong times being put on the board. And we're on to the podium positions. It will be 3rd place for Matthew Hall, a place he'd held on to all day and maintained to the end of the event. There's no change and no catching the leaders for Douglas Devon or Batt, but that wasn't a problem necessarily. 2nd place was still a fantastic result, and he'd been keeping pressure on the leader throughout the weekend. But that means that converting the lead into a win is Jason Rowlands. Success at round 3 certainly helps as far as the championship picture is concerned. It sets him up well going into the next round of the championship. So with round 3 complete, here's a look at how those final times looked by the finish. Round 4 of this year's championship heads to Minehead. And as is often the case, the sun was shining and a challenging course awaited our crews this weekend. On to the first of the day's runs, and picking up where he left off last time will be Jason Rowlands, taking an early advantage in the first 2 runs to lead by 30 seconds. This course famously has a mix of tight, twisty sections and open fields to contend with. There really was no room for error in the woods with these wider buggies. It wasn't all plain sailing though. A spin on the opening run close to the finish would show just how easy it is to get things wrong. Following on the theme of the round 3 results repeat will be Douglas Devon or Batt at this stage. 2nd place at the moment, the older car fitting through the stages with a little more room to spare as well, which would give a small amount of room for error. Not that he would be wanting to use that margin. And 3rd place at this stage will be Matthew Hall. Things looking good. A strong result last time out would mean he was looking at getting a repeat of that this weekend, or indeed a better result on the board if he could. But for now, it will be a 34-second deficit to the crew up ahead. There'd be a change for Philippa Tennant this weekend. Dad James acting as clerk of the course. She'd draft in Rob Bull to call the way. A reversal of their British cross-country roles, of course. This would be the first time on this course in the new car, but with Philippa growing up visiting this site, it was one she was excited to compete on. Bit of pressure on her shoulders perhaps as a result, and lying 4th place at this stage too, so handling it nicely. Jason and Deb Morgan make a good start to the event. No issues at all to report. They get to the end of the morning opening runs with 5th place overall. And of course, 5th in the class, as the event was once again being dominated by the Class 5 competitors. First of our other class runners will be Kieran Jones and Matthew Rowland. After working on the suspension, it would be good to see that hard work paying off, allowing them to put in some good times, in fact, setting the fastest times of the B-Maxwell cars at this stage, leading the way in Class 4 as well from a strong 6th place overall. First place in Class 9 will be Bruce Mallet. He was setting some strong times himself, the first being a little slower than the second as he bedded himself in, but that's the way things were meant to be. Things were going the right way. He leads the class, lying in 7th place on the overall leaderboard. For Paddy Barker, it will be 8th, a little way behind the others in the class, with those taking over the top of the leaderboard. But for now, 6th in the class will be an ideal end to those first runs of the day. This weekend will be the first time we'd seen Del Wheeler and Natalie Robbins in over a year. It took a little time to get up to speed after the time out of the seats, but things were starting to come back to them now. Apparently, it's like riding a bike. 2nd place in Class 4 at this stage, just inside the top 10 overall in 11th. The only trouble so far, in fact, was getting stuck behind a car in the tighter sections of the course, unable to get past. And rounding out the top 10 will be Brian and Mitchell Birch. They were enjoying the mix of fast sections and the tighter technical parts of the course, but they were having a similar problem to Wheeler up ahead, catching cars in the tighter sections. But they were at least still holding on to the lead in Class 6. There will be issues for a number of crews in the early runs of the day though. Paul Rowlands unfortunately having issues with the car, not managing to get a clean run in fact. Disappointing early end to this event. On to the next couple of runs, and it was safe to say that things were still going well for Jason Rowlands out front, extending the advantage at the top now to over 2.5 minutes. Looking like victory was his if he could stay out of trouble, not always a guarantee on these events. Still chasing him down though, and ready of course to capitalise if there were any issues up ahead. With Douglas Devonall bat. 2nd place still his, and in a prime spot to take advantage of any events happening up ahead that were somewhat untoward. No change from Matthew Hall. He still lies in 3rd place at this stage and still trying to keep that 2nd place in his sights. The gap though was getting a few seconds bigger per run, and he'd need a few more seconds to have a chance at that next step up per run. Philippa Tennant and Rob Bull were happy with their times. Rightly they should have been as well. 4th place on the overall leaderboard for now, and they were mixing it with the best and excited to see what the final runs would bring here. No change for Jason and Deb Morgan, a puncture on the 4th run of the day, thankfully not seeing them lose any positions overall or in the class. So they had a bit of a lucky escape with that one, ending run 5 with 5th on the overall leaderboard and indeed in the class. On to the final runs then of the event, and a look at those crews who finished. And it will be business as usual. They're very relieved as well, Daniel and Alan Wilcox, who come back from a lower class position to take the eventual class victory. A good end to the event and a strong result for their championship as well. And it was all good news for Jonathan Damrell and Nick Blundell. They take the Class 7 victory after a strong event with no dramas to report. There'd be some sore arms in the car though by the end after wrestling it through the tighter sections of the course. But apart from that, things were all good for the pair. They take 13th place overall. We're on to the top 10 then, and we wouldn't see any change for Brian and Mitchell Birch. They held on to that 10th place and the Class 6 lead. Only their 3rd event in the car, learning round by round and clearly getting faster. It was safe to say things were going well. The car not missing a beat all day. Toby Cox, though, would just be glad to get to the finish in the car, proving to himself and to the rest of us that all that work he'd put in had been worth it. It was standing up to the challenges of the AWDC. He ends the event with the Class 9 win, and inside the top 10 leaderboard overall with 9th. And most importantly, of course, coming away from this round with plenty of confidence after a number of years out of the sport. After their earlier time loss, it would be a fantastic fight back for Ed Smith and Beth Heaps. They'd take the class win due to being the only ones here, but it was that 8th place overall that was the real reward for their hard work, setting some impressive times to move plenty of positions through the results during the day to take that result. For Paddy Barker, things had been consistent throughout the event, managing to stay in or around the same position on the results throughout. He ends the event 7th overall and with 3rd in Class 5. And it was a good finish for Del Wheeler and Natalie Robbins, returning to the driving seat and having a good run to take 6th place overall, the fastest of the non-buggy cars this weekend as well, taking the Class 4 win with that, of course. It was great to be back out, and they were competitive as well on such a great course. Apart from their earlier puncture, no issues to report for Jason and Deb Morgan. And that didn't really affect their results anyway. They take second place in Class 5 by the finish, fifth place on the overall leaderboard. No change or indeed drama for Philippa Tennant and Rob Bull, finishing with a fantastic fourth place overall. A great run would see them swapping times with all of those competitors around them, indeed, putting in their own fastest time on the final run of the day as well. We're on to the podium positions then, and there's really not that much change, either from the morning's results or indeed from the previous round. Matthew Hall takes that third place, a repeat of his finish last time out. He'd suffer some damage after getting a little close to a tree on the final run of the event on this course, but thankfully for him, would get away without having to stop or lose any positions as a result. Douglas Devenall Bat once again wasn't able to catch the leader, but he was able to hold off everyone else behind, taking another second place result and with over a minute of an advantage in that position as well over third. But taking victory this weekend and adding another win to the tally for the season would be Jason Rowlands. A good, clean drive would see him taking the win by a considerable margin by the end of the day, really boosting his championship campaign going into the second half of the season. So with round 4 in Minehead complete, the results at the top shaped up like this. Round 5 of the all-wheel drive Britpart Safari Championship is up next, and it takes place at a brand new venue near Landrindod Wells, a site owned by sponsor Paul Rowlands of Parr Homes. The course looks nice and challenging with its steep tracks and off-camber corners, and taking the early lead of the event and taking the challenge with aplomb would be Jason Rowlands. Winner last time out, he'd be looking at a home victory, of course, this weekend. But he wouldn't have it all his own way, as it had been at the previous round. Second at this stage will be Douglas Devenall Bat, going well, putting in some strong times to keep within 23 seconds of the event lead now. Third for now, and the home advantage for Paul Rowlands, only a single second off the fastest time on the opening run. But issues on the second run would see him lose around a minute, slipping down the order slightly, but still close enough to keep the hopes of a win alive. Aston Cox will be here this weekend as a warm-up for the British Cross Country Championship, which was due to visit this same venue in a few weeks' time. And it was going well so far, warm-ups considered, leading the way in Class 8 and in fourth overall on the leaderboard. Frustratingly though, it wasn't to last. Problems would prevent him from going any further. For Jordan Albury, this would be fifth place and a strong start to the event. He'd get a little overexcited on this corner in the morning runs, but thankfully, nothing in there to hit. He'd carry on to a good overall position, second in Class 8 on the leaderboard for now. Guy Smith was back out again with Ryan Dunn alongside, and things were going well. The times on the second run of the morning were much better, so it was going in the right direction for the pair for now. Jason and Deb Morgan were enjoying the new course. It had been raining the night before, making some of the corners, particularly on the grass, pretty slippery. But they were going well with no issues and having some fun out there to lie fifth in class, seventh overall for now. That fantastic result last time out will be a confidence boost for Philippa and James Tennant. And they were going well from the start here as a result, perhaps. They'd end the morning 8th overall, 6th in the extremely popular and hotly contested Class 5. And it was a new car this weekend to concentrate on for Rob Morris. A great course to give it its first run as well. Things going well so far. Clearly, it was good to drive. He ended the first 2 runs in 9th. And rounding out the top 10 will be Paddy Barker. Consistent times over the first 2 runs would put him in 10th overall, chasing down a massive pack in that Class 5 entry. On to the next few runs then, and there wouldn't be any change at the top. Jason Rowlands keeping things neat and tidy and holding on to that lead through to the end of run 5. Still chasing him down will be Douglas Devonall's bat. The leader may have been opening up a bigger advantage, but that was also happening in second place as well. Now, almost 3 minutes of a lead over third. There'd be some change in that final podium position as well, though. Well, sort of. Third place was still being occupied by Paul Rowlands for now, and indeed the final run of this loop would be his best yet. However, that third place wasn't safe. And that's because showing just how close the AWDC is, all the way through the leaderboard in fact, but particularly here at the top, he now shared that position with Guy Smith and Ryan Dunn. The times overall identical. They'd closed in on the podium positions over these runs, and now it was all to play for in the final 3 runs of the day. Jason and Deb Morgan also move up the leaderboard a little. A welcome move as well. They climbed 2 positions from 7th to 5th. It was all going swimmingly. No issues to report for the pair. On to the final runs of this brand new event then, and a look at how our finishers ended up here at round 5 of the series. And the long-time leaders of the class today, Daniel and Alan Wilcox, would keep hold of that lead and take victory. They add some more points to the board, and of course it's all about those championship points at this point in the season, and they finish in 22nd place on the overall results. It had been a good run for Adam Borrell and Emma Hollings though. They didn't have to do anything to the car all weekend, which is always a success in itself. Taking the Class 2 win and 14th place overall was even better. Nick Collins and Alison Brooks had been running a smaller intercooler this weekend after the replacement one wasn't ready in time, so the car was overheating a little. They'd have to keep letting it cool down a little between runs, but out on the course, it went well. The pair taking the Class 7 victory and 13th on the leaderboard. So rounding out that top 10 at the end of the event were Kieran Jones and Eloise Donovan. They do drop back a bit due to an issue with the car being a bit down on power here, but that doesn't change the Class 4 result, and they take victory there. The eagle-eyed among you will notice that means it's a position gained in the final runs for Brian Birch, stepping up to 9th place overall now. Pretty pleased to take first in Class 6 as well, as right he should be. Ed Smith and Beth Heaps, meanwhile, continue their strong run to take the Class 3 victory, and most importantly, they take 8th place overall. Indeed, they were the fastest non-buggy crew this weekend, and that result was pretty well deserved. As we continue up or down the top 10, depending on which way you look at it, there wasn't that much change. Certainly for Philip and James Tennant, they were pretty pleased about that. It was still 7th place. The time's good, and they even put in their own personal fastest time on the final run of the event. Paddy Barker had gained a few positions in the morning and would keep hold of them into the second half of the event. A good, solid run to end the day with a fast 6th place overall. Jason and Deb Morgan would report a good clean run with no problems at all. Those are the kind of days to have here in this championship. They mean points. And today, they mean 2nd place in the class and 5th overall. The 5th run of the day saw 2 crews fighting for that final step of the podium. And in the final runs, it would be Guy Smith and Ryan Dunn having to relinquish that position. They settle for 4th overall, taking the Class 5A victory though, perhaps as consolation. So we're on to the final positions then, and after a better afternoon, it will be a 3rd place overall finish for Paul Rowlands. The car seemed to have a bit of an electrical issue that they just couldn't put their fingers on. Aren't they the worst? Thankfully, it didn't cost them a finish, but 3rd place still wasn't going to keep them in the running for the championship title, and their eyes are right on that. Someone that was in the running, though, is Douglas Devonall Bat. A good run of finishes on the podium was all adding up, and this weekend it will be another 2nd place to add to the tally. So that, of course, means it is victory this weekend for Jason Rowlands. This putting him in a favourable position in the championship, surely making him favourite with a few rounds to go. On this pace, the title was looking just about within his sights. So with round 5 complete, the results at the top looked like this. After a slightly longer break than planned due to the planned Ilfracombe round being cancelled, the crews were back out on some less than favourable conditions at Wadden. And fastest over the morning's opening runs will be second place from the previous round, Douglas Devonall Bat. The conditions were tricky, to say the least, but things were going well, and he opened up a small lead of 6 seconds at this early stage. Second place at this stage, just as quick out of the blocks as he was last time out, will be Jason Rowlands. Fastest on the opening run of the day, but not quite gaining enough time on the second run to keep that early lead. And third place at this early stage will be in the hands of Joe Philpott. And it was clear, looking at the conditions and the results, that the buggies were going to be the ones to beat this weekend, filling out the podium positions and indeed much of the top 10 overall leaderboard. This would only be the third Comp Safari event for Shabs Piercy and Sai Sagar. They had shown some good pace on previous rounds, but had been let down by reliability. So far this weekend, though, that seemed to be behind them. With only 2 runs complete, it was hard to say how the rest of the event would play out, but so far, so good. Fifth at this stage will be the GSR Racing team, and they were putting in some strong times as well, continuing to add more Class 5 crews to the top of the results, with 5th overall and in the class. No issues to report for Jason and Deb Morgan. They were going well, as was the car. The times looking good too. They end run 2 with 6th overall. And just behind them on the overall and class results will be Matthew Hall. Fresh from a 3rd place finish as a co-driver on the recent Yorkshire Hill Rally, he was back in the driving seat this weekend, ending the morning with 7th. And this weekend will be the local event for Ed Smith and Beth Heaps. They put in some good times through the opening runs of the day in conditions that certainly shouldn't have suited that rear-wheel drive car, but they were going well, sitting in 8th place overall for now, ready for a big push from that Class 3 lead. There was a bit of a buffer in that position as well, a comfort margin of around 30 seconds back to Paddy Barker, who ends this run with 9th overall. And rounding out the top 10 were Philippa and James Tennant. They were close on the times to Barker, only 3 seconds between the two, so the next few runs would be crucial. On to the next few runs, and there'd be some change in the top of our leaderboard. We see Shabs Piercy and Sai Sagar having a good, clean run with no issues to take the lead now. The reliability still seeming to be good at this stage, although, given their past experiences so far on the events they'd done, they'd no doubt be listening for every little noise right to the finish. That change in the lead means it's also a drop down to 2nd for Douglas Devonall Bat. He was keeping in with a shout of that victory still, though, only 4 seconds between the pair at this stage. No change for Joe Philpott, still 3rd for him. Indeed, there would only be 10 seconds between him and 2nd. So it was all quite close in the podium positions after 5 runs. There was a bit of time lost though for Jason Rowlands, slipping down the order a little into 4th. 9 seconds back from the podium positions, so with 3 more runs to go, he'd be likely on a big push. For Guy Smith, meanwhile, it will be 5th place still. No change in that overall or class position for him, although now the times on the leaderboard were getting a bit further apart than those up ahead. It was going to be a big push if he was looking at making any moves at all on the rest of that leaderboard, at least in an upward direction. On to the final runs of the day then here at Wadden. It was bad news for Joe Philpott though. After such a good run and with a chance of a podium result at the very least, he would suffer damage to the front corner of the car, forced to miss the final 2 runs of the event, and as a result finishing down in 24th. And run 5 was pretty eventful. It would see Martin Clark and Chris Norton suffering some damage to their top mount. But with some help, They too managed to get things sorted and back out again on the course. And they take their first ever Class win this weekend in Class 1. A good job that they got back out on that course, isn't it? And things had worked well this weekend for Adam and Emma Borrell. They get to the finish with no issues to report whatsoever. The car working as it should, and the pair able to take the Class 2 victory as well as 18th overall. For Brian Dyke, meanwhile, it would be the Class win in Class 7. A strong run throughout the day, keeping things going in the right direction, well, as much as possible anyway, in these muddy conditions. He takes 16th overall. And apart from a few missing mud flaps, which you obviously need when it's muddy, it will be a trouble-free run for Adam Warts and Peyton Lewis. They managed to take the Class 4 win this weekend, the pair doing enough for 13th place on the overall results as well. Tom Woodward and Oakley Hayward were getting to grips with the car once again after spending 3 months away with a broken gearbox. And they were going well. They'd slide into a ditch though on the final run, putting the car on its side and losing around 4 minutes in the process. They take 11th place overall, but it could certainly have been a top 10 finish had it not been for that mishap. So we're on to a hard-fought top 10, pretty grueling in these conditions as well, and it will be 10th place for Brian Birch. That result seeing him taking the Class 6 win as well this weekend. For Ed Smith and Beth Heaps, it will be 9th. It was their aim to finish in the top 6 of an event this season, but that wasn't to be this weekend. And with conditions like this, it was no wonder why. The rain coming down heavy for the final run and costing the pair around a minute. Things had gone to plan for Paddy Barker. There'd be no issues to report other than being another of the crews to have been caught out in that final run downpour. But 8th overall was a good finish. Philippa and James Tennant also happy with their 7th place overall finish. They'd had a good position in the results all day, and importantly, they'd kept things in one piece to the finish. There was not much more that Matthew Hall could possibly have done. He ends the event 6th on the overall results, and with the top crews not claiming a class award as well as the overall ones, it means that Matthew does enough for a 3rd place trophy in the 5A class. Just ahead of Hall on the overall and the class timesheets will be Jason and Deb Morgan. They'd had a good run, they were happy with their times, and they'd be taking a 2nd place finish in the class as well. For Guy Smith, it was the Class 5 win. With those podium position crews not taking a class award, he also takes that 1st place in Class 5. And also finishes just the other side of the podium in 4th overall. Not a bad day's driving on this muddy and tricky course. On to those podium positions then, and the lead had been changing hands all day. It had been close out there. But it would be bad luck for Jason Rowlands. He goes out for his final run just as the heavens opened, losing around a minute, costing them at least 1 position, possibly overall victory. There was no change to 2nd place though. Douglas Devenall-Batt had been one of the crews leading at one point during the event. He'd held it there to the finish as well. 2nd place, a good finish this weekend and in the championship. But taking the victory will be Shabs Piercy and Sai Sagar. They'd had the speed on previous rounds, but the reliability just hadn't been there. This weekend it all came together and they took their 1st ever victory on only their 4th Comp Safari event. So with round 6 complete, here's a reminder of the final overall results here at Whaddon. Round 7 of the AWDC Britpart Safari Championship sees us head to Walters Arena and the AJS 100. And with 2 full days of racing ahead to challenge our crews and their machines, let's get straight out onto the course and onto the action. Leading the way on the first runs of the day will be Warren Roper and Aaron Birch. They'd have an overshoot early on, but some good times would see them leading the way after run 3. For Jason Rowlands, it would be second place for now. He was in line for the championship title if things went well this weekend. So it was a case of a measured drive to go with that usual fast pace we're used to seeing. And it will be a great start for John Morgan. He ends the opening morning third place, the final step on the podium for now, and the time's getting better run by run. For Rob Morris, it was a good start as well, lying in fourth place at this stage and just 20 seconds back from Morgan up ahead. Douglas Devonall-Batt will be looking for a strong result this weekend for his championship campaign. There were a few places to be gained to get up to those podium positions, but things were still going well for now in fifth. And Jason and Deb Morgan would make a good start and would manage to end the morning in sixth overall. It was a competitive morning in the Class 5 leaderboard as well, with the top of the results dominated by those crews. Philippa and James Tennant were going well, so well in fact that they decided not to change drivers this weekend and continue letting Philippa take the wheel. They end run 3 in 7th place. It was a puncture that will be hindering progress a little for Matthew Hall. He'd end the morning with 8th place. He didn't really lose any time over the first run of the day, but without that puncture, he should have been faster. It cost him at least 2 positions overall. No issues to report though for Michael Tilney and Jordan Shirley. A good start to the event would see them ending the morning 9th place overall. And rounding out the top 10 would be Andy Skelly and Tom Aubrey. A good start, but they'd retire on the next run. The brakes catching fire, and it would be game over for the pair. Back onto that course here at Walters Arena for the afternoon runs, and we lose Warren Roper and Aaron Birch. They get a puncture on run 4, but it will be a broken rear diff on the very next run, ending the event early for the pair. So that would mean it was the lead now for Jason Rowlands, staying out of trouble and getting himself to the top of the standings once again. And with day 1 complete, it was a good position to be starting the second day of competition, that was for sure. For Douglas Devonall-Batt, it would be a good run through the afternoon, seeing him moving up to take second overall. Much more of a familiar location for him than his earlier 5th place, but he would still be pushing here on the leaderboard on day 2. It has to be said, this was the perfect end to the day for Jason and Deb Morgan. They end the Saturday runs on the podium so far. No issues to report. And if they could have a repeat of this on day 2, they'd be very happy, and their leaderboard position would be very strong indeed. After that earlier puncture, Matthew Hall was making a bit of a comeback on the leaderboard now, moving into 4th overall by the end of the opening day. It was a good position to start day 2 from as well. Michael Tilney, meanwhile, was enjoying some tuition from co-driver Jordan Shirley today, and that, along with a trouble-free run, would see them ending the opening day with 5th. Philippa and James Tennant would have to change the steering rack after run 4, which, sadly for them, changed the handling a little into the final 2 runs of the day. And as a result, they don't go as quick as they'd have wanted, but 6th place overall was a good position to be finishing the day. Mick and George Chick make their way into the top 10 leaderboard overall now after a steady start, it's fair to say. The times were consistent though, and that matters on a course like this. 8th place at this stage will be Guy Smith, a little way back from the crew up ahead, but that wasn't really an issue at this stage, running inside the top 10 overall for now. And Ed Smith and Beth Heaps were going well, apart from a snapped front arm on the suspension, that is. Luckily, the pair had a new one and could get that changed and back out onto the course to continue their strong run so far. And rounding out the top 10 will be Paddy Barker, and despite a good result overall so far, he'd still be 8th in the class, showing just how dominant the Class 5 crews were here at Walters this weekend. We head into day 2 then, and there would be a few small changes to the course, but no change to the lead, small or not. Jason Rowlands still keeping that advantage at the top, and with a pretty good lead in that position as well. Second place would still belong to this man, Douglas Devonall-Batt. The gap to the lead was getting a little bigger, but he'd still be keen to hold on to that 2nd place. And things were certainly going in the right direction for Matthew Hall as well, managing to end the morning in 3rd place overall and getting close to that 2nd spot as well. For Jason and Deb Morgan, things had been going pretty well all weekend. They'd end the morning 4th, themselves not too far off the podium position, so anything was possible going into the afternoon runs. There was a change of navigator to keep an eye on for Michael Tilney. Tom Aubrey stepping in for day 2. Things were still looking good for the pair though. They'd end the morning in 5th. Still no issues to report either for William Freeman and Lacey Remnant. They lie in 6th overall, a great position to take into the final runs of the event. There were early problems though for Philippa and James Tennant. They'd have an issue with the clutch, having to ease off and get back to service to get it replaced. Thankfully for them, they were able to source parts from some of their fellow crews. For Mick and George Chick, it would be 8th place overall. They'd had a good run so far this weekend. The time's a match for those around them on the leaderboard as well. For Guy Smith, it would be 9th place overall. He'd be just over a minute back, but that was hardly a song and dance after a full day and a half of racing. And rounding out the top 10 were Ed Smith and Beth Heaps. The alternator broke and would take all morning to get sorted, but they were able to get going and put in some good times after that. Thanks to Brian Birch for the loan of the new alternator too. We go into the final few runs of the weekend then. Chris and David Bowler would start day 2 with a leaking brake pipe, or they would have done, had a fellow competitor not spotted it on the start line. They did manage to get it sorted and get back out. A puncture on the second run though would need to be changed on the course, and a rear shocker ripped off on the final run just to add a bit more drama. Caused a few handling issues as you might expect for the pair. They take the Class 2 victory though. There was last-ditch frustration over Mick and George Chick. It was a drop down to 15th place overall, a maximum on the penultimate run of the day, ruining a top 10 result for the pair. There'd be issues for Douglas Devenall Batt too. He should have been on for a second-place finish, but wouldn't come out of the last run of the day, having to settle for 12th. There's bitter disappointment though for Michael Tilney and Tom Aubrey from the top of the leaderboard. They'd finished the event, but a ball joint failure would put them way down the order, missing out on what was surely a potential podium finish overall. We're on to the top 10 then, and it would be a good weekend for William Freeman and Lacey Remnant. All going well, no problems for the pair at all, and a strong top 10 position. Pretty much the same story for Peter and Louise Medley. They have a good, clean run to take 9th overall. A couple of punctures would hold back Kieran Jones, with Matthew Rowland and Louise Donovan alongside. And they'd have a good run besides this. 8th place was as much as they could manage though this weekend. Things had gone to plan, meanwhile, for Brian Birch here on day 2. He ends the event 7th overall, leading Class 6 by the finish. And Paddy Barker was on a charge here on day 2, gaining some valuable time throughout the event and moving up to take a very strong 6th overall by the end. And it was a very happy Ed Smith and Beth Heaps who finally get the top 5 finish that they have been looking for and fighting pretty hard for as well. They had a little issue with the gearbox by the end of the day and had to look after that a little. But apart from that, it had been a very good weekend's racing. And it had also been a good weekend's racing for this man, Guy Smith, in the Class 5 battle. He ends the event 4th place overall, and with the podium finishers not scoring class points, it means that he takes the maximum point score there as well. So that means it's a podium for Philippa and James Tennant. And in fact, Philippa's first podium doing all of the driving herself. They had a split turbo hose to contend with as well by the end of the event. But that, despite losing a bit of time, did not affect this strong result. And there'd be a puncture to contend with late in the day for Jason and Deb Morgan. And they dropped a bit of time as well as a result, but not enough to lose them 2nd place overall. The highest finish the pair had ever got in the AWDC as well. But for Jason Rowlands, it was victory. And of course, being in the fight for the championship, this was all he needed to take that title.
and with his
So
dad
with round
taking
three
the British
complete,
cross-country
here's a look at
championship
how those
win
final
only a few
times
weeks earlier.
looked by the
This was
finish.
a pretty good result for the Rowlands family, who are taking over cross-country racing here in the UK, aren't they? So with round 7 complete, here's how the overall results shaped up at the end of 2 competitive days.
So the championship may be decided, but with one more round to go, there were still some class and overall positions to be fought out. But fastest of the crews over the morning runs on the final round wouldn't be worrying about any of that. Ryan Dunn leading the way, and here is a one-off, so there'd be no pressure out in the lead. Douglas Devenall Bat was in the championship though, and was leading the way there from second place, but he'd be wanting to end the season on a high. Steve Hill and James Coonan had made some changes to the car since their last outing, so they were here to do some testing, and it was safe to say that was going well. They lie in third place, the lead in Class 9, just one puncture on run 3 to deal with so far this morning. James and Philippa Tennant needed to finish this round above Guy Smith to secure third in the championship. And with James driving the car for the morning's runs, they would manage to keep ahead for now. Fourth overall, third in the class as well at this stage. Crucially, they held the advantage over Guy Smith that they needed for the championship podium, but it wasn't the biggest of gaps, just over 25 seconds, so there'd be no backing off for either crew through the afternoon as they chase after that result. Sixth place at this stage will be Paddy Barker, and it was close here too, just over 20 seconds the difference. He lies just behind Smith in the class and overall leaderboards. Adam Warts and Peyton Lewis, meanwhile, will be setting some fast times in the B-Maxwell car, although punctures and bent rims were a problem. They were having to remove wheels and straighten them after each of the runs, but they do lead the way in Class 4, lying in 7th overall. For Brian Birch, it will be the lead in Class 6. A good start to this final round of the season and lying in 8th overall as well for now. And just the one crew to contend the 5B class result this weekend. So Peter Jackson will be leading the way there, naturally. He lies just inside the top 10 as well in 9th. And rounding out the top 10 were Kieran Jones and Eloise Donovan. They had the class championship in the bag already, so this weekend was all about having fun. Although issues with the ECU relay and the gearbox were causing a bit of a headache this morning. Things were going well, meanwhile, for William Freeman and Lacey Remnant. They put in some good times to lie in 11th overall, second in Class 6. And this will be the second outing in the car for Martin Tiffles and Kev Smith. They get held up a little on run 1, but apart from that, things were going well. They lie third in the class for now. No problems to report for Alex Freeman and James Slaughter. They get through the morning without any dramas to take the Class 7 lead and 14th on the overall leaderboard. Just behind, though, in the class and overall leaderboards were Mike and Margaret Bakewell. The plan this weekend was to share the driving, with Mike taking the first 4 runs of the day. Leading Class 2 at this point, from 16th overall, would be Adam Borrell. A good start to the event and a strong lead in the class for now as well. And Class 1 was a 2-horse race this weekend. For now, it will be Daniel and Alan Wilcox who were leading that race. They have a good advantage as well, so the class win looking good at this stage. David and Chris Bowler, meanwhile, make a good start to the event. Apart from a puncture on the first run of the day, it was all going pretty well. They end the morning second in Class 2, 24th overall. Dave and Lindsay Bakewell would have a trouble-filled morning. They had power steering issues on run 2, getting those sorted, but then a puncture close to the start of run 4, causing them to pull over and take a maximum to avoid any further damage ahead of the afternoon runs. It was a similar story as well for Barry Dodd and Kim Baker. They get 2 punctures on one side of the car, resulting in a broken wheel as well in one case. They'd have to pull over to save any further damage. Connor Francis and Bill Harrison, though, needed a new engine after the previous round. One was sourced and fitted, but sadly they encountered some issues along the way, a loose connection forcing them to break down on the first run. But worst was to come when a turbo blew on the next run of the day, having to limp the car back to the service area. Louis and Peter Medley were finding the first half of the course tough on the car. They'd raised it a little since last time to try and protect the car, but that had upset the grip levels when they'd hit a concrete block, having to call it a day on run 4. It was retirement as well for Nick Collins and Alison Brooke. Punctures on the first few runs didn't help their cause, but mechanical issues a little later in the day would mean they are forced to call it an early bath. So with the morning complete at the final round, the results are looking like this. On to the afternoon runs then and the final miles of this season. And for Connor Francis and Bill Harrison, it was just about getting to the end. They limped round with a blown turbo, finishing the day second in class, 26th overall, maximum damage limitation. Frustratingly, there was another puncture and another maximum for Dave and Lindsay Bakewell, finishing down in 24th overall after a pretty grueling last weekend of the year. But they take second in Class 9 and would be happy with the way things had gone when the car was running well and all told. David and Chris Bowler, though, would end the event with second in Class 2. It would be down to Chris taking the fastest time of the two, but David wasn't far behind, just 9 seconds slower. David will be back out next season, but will be taking on the driving solo this time. More punctures would be on the cards, though, for Barry Dodd and Kim Baker. They used all of the spares that they brought with them. They get to the end, though, taking 4th place in Class 4. And after leading all day, it will be the Class 1 win for Daniel and Alan Wilcox. They have a good, clean run, helped, of course, with problems behind, to take the Class win here at the final round. There was more frustration over William Freeman and Lacey Remnant. They'd have an issue when the spring mount on the axle sheared and went through the steering arm and brake line. Game over on the final run, and a maximum that puts them down in 18th overall. For Adam Borrell, it will be the Class 2 win, though, ending the event with that lead in 17th overall. And it was a puncture early into run 6 that would see Martin Tipples and Kev Smith having to limp the car around the course. But apart from that, things had gone pretty well. They take 3rd in Class 4, 15th on the overall leaderboard. Just ahead in the class by the finish were teammates Kieran Jones and Eloise Donovan. They were having their own dramas, though. The gearbox down to only 3rd and 4th gears, and then down to only 4th gear for the final few runs. A bit of a Days of Thunder moment, making the tighter sections a little tricky. Just give me the high gear. Leighton Dodds finishes the event just outside the top 10, overall in 11th, a position that would see him taking 2nd in Class 6 as well. We're on to the top 10 overall, and for Mike and Margaret Bakewell, it would be that 10th spot. The plan was for Margaret to take over the driving in the afternoon, but with Mike having so much fun, he was allowed to continue for the day, taking 2nd place in Class 7 as well. It will be a good, clean run for Alex Freeman and Justin Slaughter this weekend. No issues to report at all. The pair were able to take the Class 7 win comfortably, as well as 9th on the overall leaderboard. And for Brian Birch, it will be the Class 6 win. A good end to the event, and indeed the season. He takes 8th place on the overall season championship leaderboard. Adam Warts and Peyton Lewis were clearly trying right to the end of the event. And you know what? It paid off as well. They take the Class 4 victory, and with it, the fastest of the Beam Axle cars too, in 7th overall. The pair had a great season and wanted to thank everyone who had helped and supported them along the way, especially Adam's dad for keeping the car going. For Paddy Barker, it will be 6th place to end the event. They have a good run here to take 2nd in their class as well. And speaking of that class, taking victory will be Guy Smith. It wasn't enough for him to take 3rd in the championship overall, but it was a strong end to a good season in 5th overall here at the final round. 3 more punctures, though, would hamper the progress a little for Steve Hill and James Coonan. But they came here to test the car, and test it they did. The Class 9 win was a bonus, and 4th overall, a strong end to their season. Philippa and James Tennant do what they needed to do for their podium in the championship this weekend. Philippa taking over the driving through the afternoon and maintaining that good pace to end the event in 3rd overall. All of that means there's no change to the top positions, with Douglas Devonall-Batt taking 2nd on the event this weekend. It was a good end to what had been a pretty successful season overall. But taking the overall win would be Ryan Dunn. That lead all day was held throughout the afternoon as well to take victory by 20 seconds. A close battle for sure, and another winner putting his name on the top of the results at around this season, boding well surely for 2025. So with all that drama, the final round is complete, and the leaderboard at the top shaped up like this. So that's it for the 2024 All-Wheel Drive Britpart Safari Championship. We'll be back in 2025 to bring you all of the action from this exciting series. We hope you enjoyed a look back at how the season was decided, and we'll see you again in March for round 1 of the new season. In the meantime, thanks for watching.
Care 40 for Rateable Crest Titans.